Hello and a warm welcome to Federal's special program Capital Beat. As the conflict in West Asia pushes up energy and commodity prices, its ripple effects are beginning to spread far beyond oil and gas, with sectors such as textiles, mining, steel making in India starting to feel the pressure. The impact is emerging through a chain of second and third order effects linked to fuel costs, petrochemicals, feedstock, chemicals, and disruptions in global shipping routes along with the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I would like to put out certain graphics which go to show that what are the three types of impacts which are felt. Now, if you look at the three types of impact on the industry, the first, of course, is the shortage of imported raw materials due to rising shipping and container costs. Then there is a EU CBAM, which is shifting the export markets, and that has pushed the prices of the natural gas, LPG supply concerns. These are a set of impacts which we are talking about, and of course, one is the raw material I spoke about, which is shortage in imported raw materials, increasing in shipping containers. Second is the market impact. Now, after the European Union, I'm just trying to explain it a little that after the European Union imposed the restrictions like CBAM, a lot of industries started looking to West Asia as a market, and that is getting impacted. And the third, which is very important, of course, is the fuel and the feedstock supplies, which are related to natural gas and the LPG supply. So this is going far beyond the oil and gas. For the last 2 days, we've been discussing on the federal how deep has been the LPG crisis, how deep has been the gas crisis, how deep has been the oil crisis. Today, we will talk about sectors which are beyond oil and gas. Now, to begin with the first sector, can we have the graphics play out, Shravan, of the first sector which is getting impacted? And if you could just play out that graphics. Shravan, you have the set of graphics which are ready. We go sector wise. Yes. So first let's look at the textile sector. Now the processing costs are rising, higher fuel and power prices, dyeing, bleaching, finishing, energy intensive sectors, that's also getting impacted. And of course, the operational costs are increasing. So this is particularly, I'm talking about the textile sector. Let's put out the next sector because these are all sectors which are going beyond oil and gas. This is just not about the oil crisis or the gas crisis. Now look at the packaging material, how that is getting impacted. Now plastic packaging prices have doubled. Suppliers are demanding cash payments. Now these are logistical and the working problems which are coming along with this Iran crisis. So suppliers demanding cash payments, then working capital pressure is rising. Packaging costs are now 5 to 7% of total expenses. So this is the impact on the packaging material. Now let's take the other sector because as I told you, it's just not about oil and gas. There are several sectors. Now, if you look at the coking coal prices, they have risen due to shipment delays linked to the West Asia tensions, raising costs for steel producers. So this is the steel sector. Coking coal supply disruptions, shipping delays push up the prices, higher input costs for steel makers, import dependence increase risk because you are dependent on the imports. Now let's look at the next sector. These are just a few sectors which we have brought in, but it's a variety of sectors which are getting impacted because of the basic fundamentals of the oil and the gas. Now look at the far-reaching shock waves which you see. The glass industry. Now continuous 24/7 manufacturing process is required for any glass industry. Can that happen? That's a big question mark. Furnace operations cannot be paused. You have to keep it on. How do you keep it on? That's also another impact which you feel. Shutdowns risk technical damage. Now, if you keep shutting down, then there is a technical damage to the entire glass industry. And of course, the last point is high financial losses if disrupted. So obviously, your product gets impacted and the entire processing also gets impacted. So we've explained to you so many sectors, but if you look at in entirety, from steel to diapers to paints, everything is getting impacted. So today we thought of calling the people from two industry representatives. to discuss this larger impact on the Indian economy arising due to the Iran war. Joining me this evening is Dr. Ajay Sahai, who's the DG and CEO of FIEO, which is the Federation of Indian Export Organizations, which is popularly known as FIEO. And we also have with us Mr. Vinod Kumar, who's the president of the India SME Forum, which obviously represents the small and medium enterprises. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining. And let me begin with Dr. Ajay Sahai. Dr. Ajay Sahai, so many industries have got impacted now, but the government isn't coming out very clearly about the impact. But as the DG and the CEO of FIEO, how grave is this pressure on the Indian economy? When you talk about the exports,
Please
yes.
bear in mind that in an era of globalization, all countries are interconnected in some way or the other. So if war happen in any part of the world, we all will be impacted. The degree will vary depending on the location of the country, and therefore the problem which you are highlighting is not something which is exclusive to India. Probably the entire economy, the global economy, is facing that kind of uncertainty and the headwinds. Unfortunately, the sector which I am representing, the export sector, is the worst hit. The orders are getting cancelled, orders are deferred. Those shipments which have moved from the factory, they have not been shipped. There is cost of putting them in yard or in the ports. Those who have sailed, there is an additional surcharge which has come, which has made the whole costing haywire. There is challenge where containers are not moving, and it's very difficult for them to keep into the factory also, particularly where we have 24 by 7 operation happening. Coupled with the fact that since the transportation is taking a longer time, buyers will definitely delay the payment because buyer will make the payment only when he receives the goods. So there will be additional financial pressures on the company. The unfortunate part is that if the exporters are not realizing the payment on the due date, banks will impose the penal rate of interest, the interest subvention which is extended on export, that will also not be available. That will make the entire costing haywire. Secondly, it is not a problem which just confined for export to Middle East or export to Europe and even to the east coast of the US. Will have to take a very longer route. It has to go via the Cape of Good Hope with an additional sailing time of 10 to 20 days, which entails a cost also. Shipping lines have not come with the new freight for these kinds of the distances, but I'm pretty sure it will move upward also. Along with that, the air freight has moved. In fact, I was talking to some exporter recently in Jaipur. They said that air freight from Jaipur to US, which was around 200 rupees per kg, has already crossed 600 rupees per kg. So we are definitely in a very difficult situation. It is bound to impact the India's exports for the month of March and may pull down the overall export number for the current fiscal also, because from 28th onward we are seeing very less movement, and probably a lot of export may not happen in this month. But of course we are not expecting a loss of export. Some of that may move forward in the next year if the situation is brought to normalcy. So short point which I am making is that of
Dr.
course
Sahai,
it's
if I
very
may
challenging
interrupt you,
situation.
if I may interrupt you briefly, that we do not know when the war is ending, even though Donald Trump, day before yesterday, said that the war may end anytime soon, but we don't see the signs of the war dying out or dimming out very soon. Now, what is the window period you are looking at? I mean, if you're saying that, we'll have to just wait and watch, and things are looking precarious. But what kind of a window period do the Indian exports have, which are dependent on their oil and gas coming from the Gulf region or the Middle East? How much of the window period do you really have where you can sit, relax, and okay, fine, we'll wait and watch? So, what is that window period you're looking at?
I think we are looking into window period of around 90 days because we have the oil reserve of around 90 days. Even if no oil imports happen, probably the situation will not be bad. But at the same time, we have to create the buffer also into the country, and fuel is an important part of the overall costing. The good thing
No,
is
but
that
90 days period which you are saying is for the overall transit of the oil and gas. But
no,
the industries which are dependent, say for example the glass industry or the paint, How do they get impacted during this time?
Right now, if I'm talking about only oil, I'm not talking about the gas. What we've been given to understand that country has an inventory of around 90 days. So for 90 days, I'm expecting this to flow. On the gas front, there is definitely challenges because gas storage is little limited. We have already seen where a lot of industry have been there have been snapped of the gas supply, which is impacting the export. Particularly when you talk about the glass industry, we know that entire Firozabad is run on the gas. So if the gas is not supplying, then the industry will come to a grinding halt, and that will impact the employment. The short point which I'm making is that, of course, is very challenging time, but probably we have to look into what best can be given done in the given situation. The good thing is that government is proactively engaged with the industry. Government has provided some relief to the industry also, and I'm pretty sure in times to come we will see much more relief flowing into that. This is a situation where all stakeholder has to support each other, and they have to be a cost of that. It is not advisable that we pass on the entire burden to one or two stakeholder, be it exporter, be it the shipping line. Probably everyone has to share its own responsibility.
I'll come to Mr. Vinod Kumar now. Are talking about the small and the medium enterprises. Now, I've been reading like a lot of reports have come out in Financial Express and Economic Times that these small but essential. I'm just giving you one example that small but essential garment components are also seeing a cost escalation. Items such as zippers, labels, buttons, many of which are made using plastic or other petrochemical derivatives, have also become more expensive as raw material prices are rising. I want you to explain as to how these small and medium enterprises will get impacted. How much of a window period do they have in terms of viability and feasibility?
Thank you, Niluji. Well, as Dr. Sahai also explained, the ongoing geopolitical tensions and conflict that is happening in West Asia is definitely creating a visible ripple effect across global trade routes, energy markets, and Indian micro, small, medium enterprises, particularly those engaged in exports, are amongst the most vulnerable to these disruptions. If we look at a significant portion of India's trade with Europe and parts of Africa, it passes through the Red Sea corridor and obviously the nearby shipping lanes. The diversion of vessels due to security concerns and insurance being really expensive and all that has already resulted in longer transit times. We've already seen this higher freight charges and obviously increased insurance premiums. For MSME exporters that are operating on tighter margins, especially in sectors like you have explained, textiles, engineering goods, leather, handicrafts, food products, additional logistic costs can erode competitiveness. That's definitely true. At the same time, as you explained, the crisis is also affecting the import of critical raw materials and immediate goods used by many manufacturing sector MSMEs. So several supply chains for chemicals, petrochemical derivatives, metals, plastics, energy-linked inputs depend on these shipping routes that connect through West Asian ports and logistics hubs. Now, on the other hand, we are looking at disruption in the supply chains combined with volatility in global energy prices, which are raising input costs. But primarily, what I find is a lot of black marketing is happening. People are trying to make money while they are able to milk this crisis, and that is what is increasing. It's not actually the availability of items or raw materials and things like that, but it is also about people that are actually using this crisis to make more money, and that always happens in such situations because MSMEs do not have the ability to hedge, freight or commodity prices the way large firms do, which is what makes them particularly sensitive to such shocks. However, if you note the important difference today compared to, we've seen crises multiple times. We've seen crisis in 2009-10 when we had the big economic crisis. We are much more significantly, I would say, stronger. There's a much more proactive policy response framework that the government of India has built over the last decade or so. We're talking about a much more resilient export ecosystem, which is supported by digital trade platforms. You have improved logistics infrastructure, production linked incentive programs. We're talking about export trade mechanisms that have been expanded, and a range of focused initiatives for micro, small, medium enterprises that are allowing the government to respond quickly to external shocks. So, just in the past few days, what you've seen is you have the RBI, Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of MSME, and so many other departments that are now able to closely monitor sectoral stress, introduce calibrated support for policy wherever required. We've also seen that the government has demonstrated its ability to act swiftly. Whether you're talking about the pandemic, I mean, we faced a pandemic where nothing was available. You could not do anything, but they've acted swiftly. Even then, you saw so many mechanisms where they helped us during all these disruptions. So my feeling is that institutional preparedness provides greater confidence that India's micro, small, medium enterprise sector will be able to navigate the current geopolitical uncertainty much more effectively. However, targeted support is still necessary to cushion MSME exporters and manufacturers from all the points that we discussed, whether it's higher freight cost, whether it's raw material volatility. So measures like temporary freight support for MSME exports, improved export credit, faster trade processing, etc., will strengthen domestic MSMEs, whether it is for industrial inputs or diversifying sourcing arrangements, which is also very important to reduce vulnerability to external disruptions. On the other hand, you were talking about energy. Let me specify some numbers. Some of the information that we culled together over the last week. We're talking about 74 million odd micro, small, medium enterprises across India, out of which only 7 million are manufacturing units. And so out of them, only 30 lakh units use significant thermal energy, whether it's for boilers, furnaces, kilns, brick kilns and all that you have, dryers or processes for heating and all that. You'd be surprised to know that close to 15 lakh of these units still use coal or lignite or coke, which is available in the country. You have biomass, which is wood, husk, briquettes, etc.
You are saying that the MSME sector doesn't get impacted as compared to other industries. It's not like a
No, no, no.
major impact.
I'm trying to come there. You see, if you look at the exact number of people that are going to be affected in the near future, when you're talking about a shortage in terms of the natural gas or PNG, CNG, whatever we might call, you're talking about 400,000 units that are actually going to be affected. Otherwise, a majority of the places, coal is still the dominant fuel in many traditional MSME clusters. But you're talking about, you talked about foundries, metal casting, ceramics, food processing, chemical units, textile dyeing and processing. And you've seen that across, let's say, Morbi, the Howrah cluster. You have the Kolhapur foundries, Aligarh, Firozabad glass cluster that you were mentioning, and brick kilns across the whole country. Some of the clusters that are specifically affected are the natural gas usage clusters, which are in Surat for textile processing. You have Tirupur for textile dyeing. You have Morbi, some part of which are partly gas-based now, and you also have the NCR, which is the engineering and food processing units. There's some units which are in Ahmedabad and around that area, Ahmedabad, Gandhinagar, which is chemical and pharma MSMEs, and the Pune and Mumbai industrial belts. Now, why are these ones affected? Because for them, they have shifted from coal and the traditional mechanisms for all of this to renewable mechanisms or natural gas, which is liquefied and piped right across to them. So those are the ones that may face, as Dr. Sahai explained, but we do have a 90-day buffer that I presume the government has been talking about continuously. But we all know, in India, there are always people that are ready to make a quick buck and hold on to supplies and make things more difficult But my feeling is the government has been extremely proactive, and despite all of the challenges which we are facing, MSMEs will remain resilient. We've faced many such situations, and we will sustain the country's export growth.
You were saying that the government has been resilient, but according to the response of the government, what we have seen in the last 3 4 days, it seems that the government was not ready to share the exact real picture, because you had Hardeep Puri, the petroleum minister, saying that there is no shortage of energy. Then you had Piyush Goyal also saying that there was no shortage of energy, but there is a crisis which is brewing up, which is beyond oil and gas. I'll come to Dr. Ajay Sahai. Dr. Sahai, what are the challenges now which you preempt if the crisis doesn't end soon? And even if the Strait of Hormuz is opened up, many people and many experts believe that it's not that the oil and the gas will start getting transited immediately because of the kind of breakdown of infrastructure which has happened in Iran.
I think in this given situation, we have to see that financial health of the companies remain robust, because a lot of companies else will fall into the NPA, and once they go into the NPA, the flow line for the credit
So
will
how does
become.
government ensure that the financial health of the industry, so that they don't get completely financially disintegrated? So how do you ensure that?
I
What
think
is that kind of an
we,
institutional support which
we
the government is giving?
we need to look into the NPA norms for the company that needs to be tweaked into looking into the situation. The entire period may be considered as a force measure so that the necessary relief flow to the industry. None of the companies is pushed into this kind of bankruptcy because of these flow getting affected. Secondly, probably we also have to see to what extent we can increase the flow of money to the industry. In fact, government has a couple of meetings where they have sensitized the banks to be little extra cautious, while they remain extra cautious, little liberal also with the exporters, because they are facing a tough time. And I personally feel that a lot of benefit which government has already given, though they are non-fiscal in nature, will help in easing out the problem. For me, the priority should be that somehow we continue with the flow of money to the industry so they don't get sick. Because if they become sick, then probably even when the situation improves, they will not be there to reap the benefit of that. So that's very important. We have already printed to the government that the entire period of war may be considered force measure, which will also help the exporter to settle their claim with the foreign bars also, as the contract are getting impacted. You are not supplying as per the terms of the LC. And even if you have supplied, if the bar wants to disobey, they can do that. So probably that kind of support is required. In the given situation, we think that what the Reserve Bank of India has done in respect of the tariff war for the export to US, they can treat the period, the first quarter of 2026 as a period of moratorium, so that interest payment and the principal payment for this quarter may be postponed for 6 months or a year, so that there is a continuous flow happening to the industry.
I come for the concluding comments to Mr. Vinod Kumar, that what are the challenges which you really see, which we should be prepared at the moment? Like what you said, that the MSME sector is not going to be that badly hit, but even then, uh, obviously we can't be waiting for the crisis to balloon and then we will start getting our act together. Many people still believe that the government could not preempt the crisis, because everyone knew that this Iran war was supposed to happen. There were declarations, not once, but multiple declarations by Donald Trump himself. But even then, if we are not prepared, so what does it go to show? So that's why my question is that how do we preempt the worst of the worst situations now? And how can we get
You
ready
know,
for that?
I get your question, and I think it's very pertinent that you mentioned this. And I have been voicing some of these concerns in various forums. So I have a five-pronged strategy that we should put in place. Now, because what do you need? You need immediate shock absorption for micro, small, medium enterprises. You need medium-term resilience in case the West Asia crisis becomes prolonged. So the first priority is to protect MSMEs, those who are exporting and import-dependent manufacturers, from a certain rise, I would say, in freight, insurance, fuel, and input costs. So the government should consider a temporary trade disruption support package. focused on sectors that are most exposed to the Red Sea and West Asia roads. We're talking about textiles, engineering goods, chemicals, leather, food products, plastics, light manufacturing for that matter. Now, this could include some sort of an interest subvention on export credit. You could also talk about, like Dr. Saha explained, faster working capital enhancement by banks, emergency credit lines, which all of this we've done earlier. And obviously, whether it's the ECGC or all the other insurance mechanisms, we should offer temporary support for higher freight and war risk insurance costs, where export orders are at the risk of cancellation in case we don't deliver. The second point, we should strengthen raw material for security for micro, small, medium enterprises. A practical response would be to create a critical, I'd say, input monitoring mechanism for MSME heavy sectors, identify the most vulnerable imported items, support alternative sourcing through trade facilitation, faster customs clearances, diplomatic engagement where you can create alternative supplier countries. And we could also encourage large public sector and private procurement platforms to enable aggregated sourcing models. So micro or small units are not left to negotiate individually in a disrupted market. The third point would be, so how do you reduce the logistics burden through route diversification or export facilitation? I'd say we will need to, in case the crisis extends, India will need to help MSMEs adjust to longer shipping routes and delivery cycles. That means faster port handling. You can't spend a lot of time on the procedures that happen in ports, whether it's for import or for export. You need to have better container availability. You need to have greater use of multimodal transport and targeted support for exports moving to Europe, North Africa, and the nearby regions. We should help MSMEs renegotiate timelines, documentation, and market access support. Fourth, we should address the energy transmission effect of the crisis. We know that the West Asia tensions, if it spirals, can quickly raise the prices of oil, LNG, fuel-linked industrial inputs. For this, right response is not merely subsidy, but energy risk mitigation, where expanding access to PNG wherever feasible, supporting cluster-based biomass, and I'd say cleaner fuel alternatives, financing, which we've done before, energy-efficient boilers, machinery, and encouraging MSMEs and industrial clusters to reduce dependence on volatile imported fuels. The fifth, but a very, very important thing, which I think one step of which the government has already done, a sector-specific MSME resilience cell, which can involve the MSME ministry, the commerce, finance, petroleum, shipping, external affairs. The reason is simple. The impact is not uniform. Textile processors, foundries, chemicals, ceramics, pharma intermediaries, food exporters, engineering MSMEs all face different combinations of energy risk, input risk, and export risk. So a coordinated mechanism can identify very keenly the distress early and intervene before the units began to cut output or delaying wages or defaulting on loans, as Dr. Saha was mentioning. So we have to move beyond relief and build structural resilience. That means deeper domestic manufacturing of key intermediaries, stronger industrial cluster infrastructure, better access to hedging and trade finance tools, and a wider export market strategy. So we are not overly dependent on one geography or one shipping coordinator. From the perspective of India SME Forum, the policy approach should be clear. Do not wait for MSME distress to become visible in closures or defaults or export decline. India should act clearly early with targeted liquidity, logistics support, input security measures, and energy risk mitigation. If we can do that well, the country can not only shield MSMEs from the immediate effects of this crisis, from the West Asia war, but also emerge with a more diversified, resilient, and a globally competitive micro and small business sector.
All right, and I'll underline the word you said, if we can do that. Now, can the government do it? That is the million dollar question. So we'll have to wait and watch. And of course, we have to also keep a close eye on how the industry is responding, how long this crisis continues. So all those are things to be closely and keenly watched out for. Thank you so much, Dr. Ajay Sahai. Mr. Vinod Kumar, thank you very much for joining on the program.
Thank you.